Hi there, I'm Kate McClellan, and I've been a professional wedding planner for over 20 years now. I started Planning Collective when I noticed that though most couples are super excited about getting engaged, they quickly feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the actual process of planning their weddings. If left unchecked, this can lead to massive burnout and the urge to scrap all your plans and just elope. While this is totally normal, you don't have to sacrifice your sanity for your dream wedding. In the Wedding Planning Collective podcast, I'm going to share the processes, tips, and tools that all engaged couples like you need to feel confident, supported, and excited about your wedding plans again. Let's get started. Hey, before we jump into today's episode, I want to share a free resource that I think every engaged couple should have. AI can be an incredible wedding planning tool, but it can also give you some really terrible advice. The tricky part, if you've never planned a wedding, is that it's hard to spot the difference. And that's exactly why I created my AI wedding planning cheat sheet. Inside, I'll show you what AI is really great at when it comes to wedding planning, where you should be cautious, and how to use it to save hours of time without letting one bad AI answer derail your entire wedding plans. Plus, you'll get 30 copy and paste prompts to help you with everything from budgets and timelines to vendor emails, wedding website wording, guest list questions, and design ideas, all written specifically for wedding planning. Think of it as your AI guide to planning smarter, not harder. You can download it for free now at planningcollective.com/AI. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hey guys, Kate here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wedding Planning Collective podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode because we are bringing back something that I think is one of the most important topics to talk about when it comes to planning your wedding day, and that is the wedding day timeline. So today I'm going to outline my top 7 mistakes that I see couples make in hopes that you will not do the same. Before we jump into it though, I want to tell you a little bit more about why I chose this topic. So starting next month in August, which is just a couple of days away, that's so wild, I'm going to be starting a new monthly series called Wedding Planning Happy Hour. Each month, I'm going to tackle one specific wedding planning topic, and I'm going to help go through this all with you guys live. We'll spend about 30 minutes or so together, and I will walk you through this topic. Next month, it's going to be on timelines. So I'll walk you through how you should start creating your timeline. And then we're also going to have about 10 minutes at the end for some Q&A. So you can ask your specific questions based on that topic. While I'm starting out this new series, I'm going to rotate the dates of the week and maybe the times a little bit to try and figure out what is the best time that works for you guys. So if you have some input, I definitely would love to hear from you. But we're going to start things off on Wednesday, August 26th, and it will be at 6 p.m. EST. So make sure that you put that in your calendar, and you can head over to planningcollective.com/happy hour to sign up. But for now, let's get into the 7 biggest mistakes that I see couples make when they're putting together their wedding day timeline. I was about to say the first is by far the biggest mistake, but I think I'm probably going to say that for every one of these 7 points. So just bear with me here. That's how important I think this topic is. But the first mistake is not building in enough buffer time. Realistically, you are not going to be able to plan your wedding down to the minute. It's just not going to happen. You certainly can do that. You can put it on paper. Hair and makeup starts at 8 a.m. At 8:17, this person's going to get in the chair. And then at 9:37, it's going to be this person's time. It's just not realistic to be super detailed. But what helps account for that is adding in some buffer time. The example I usually use for this is when a bride gets dressed. In my timelines, when I'm putting in the time that we're allocating for the bride to get dressed, it's at least 30, if not 45 to 60 minutes. 60 is ideal. If I can get away with 60 minutes, that's perfect. Now, most brides are not going to take an actual 60 minutes to put their dress on. But from the moment that it's time to get ready to when you are dressed, ready to go and moving on to that next step, that is likely going to be 60 minutes. I know it's not realistic to say 1 p.m. bride puts on undergarments. 1:13, bride puts dress on up to her hips. 1:17, bride's sisters tie her into her corset.
43, bride puts on her shoes. 157, bride puts on her earrings. Like, that's just not realistic to do. So we're going to have buffer time in and around that bride getting dressed. I'm not talking about the actual process of pulling on the dress, zipping it up, tying it, hooking it, whatever it is. I'm talking about from the moment that is time to happen through when you are dressed, ready to go, and moving on to the next step, whether it's first look with dad, onto family photos. That's what I want that 45 to 60 minutes to encompass. Getting dressed, that 60 minutes is a big chunk of your day, but I also see that not having buffer in other areas is where you can have a domino effect on the wedding day timeline. So rather than trying to time things down to the minute, put things in kind of groups. If you want, you can outline what those tasks are. So give that 1 hour time frame, 1 to 2 o'clock, bride gets dressed. And then under that, you can have PJ picks with the girls, put on dress with mom, sisters help with jewelry, shoes, whatever it might be. You can bullet point those things under if it makes you feel more comfortable having those things kind of all out on one piece of paper or timeline, however you're working on your timeline. But make sure that you're being realistic about how long things are going to take, and adding in the extra buffer is really going to make things run smoother on your wedding day. Speaking of being realistic, number 2 is underestimating how long things are going to take. So again, talking about getting dressed. Yes, on a normal day when you get dressed, it's probably not going to take you 45 minutes, 40 to 60 minutes, right? We're not talking about hair and makeup, that's already done. But the action of getting dressed, that doesn't take that long. Another place that I see couples constantly underestimating is with transportation. So yes, you can go to Google Maps and find out what is the time from point A to point B, maybe from your hotel to the ceremony site, hotel to where you're going for photos with your wedding party. That's great, but that assumes that you are starting when you're in the car and you're ending when you get out of the car, right? What I see couples do all the time is allow for that, let's say it's 20 minutes to get from point A to point B. So in their timeline, they're going to say leave hotel at 2 o'clock, get to the park at 2:20. What's really going to happen is at 2 o'clock is when you're going to say, okay, it's time to go down to the shuttle, or it's time to leave the hotel. It could take you 5 minutes just to get to the front of the hotel. It could take you another 5 to 10 minutes to get everybody loaded up in the shuttle, or to get their cars from the parking lot. Somebody is inevitably going to forget their bouquet or their shoes, and they have to run back into the hotel room. So this is where I want you to add that buffer time in. And if something tells you it's going to take you 20 minutes, say 30 minutes within your timeline. Because the thing is, you don't know exactly what those little things that are going to pop up are. You don't know who's going to have to run to the bathroom, who forgot something, who lost their keys, whatever it might be. Those things are going to happen. And you want to have some buffer time in there so that those unpredictable things don't totally derail your day. And I don't want to encourage you to be like super obsessed with walking through all of those things for the day, but just try to be realistic. So again, when you say we need the wedding party to move on to the shuttle, if you're in a massive hotel property, that's going to take a while, right? If you're at home and it's simply walking out the door, great. If you have a smaller group, that's probably not going to take all that much time, but you do want to account for that buffer and be realistic with how long things are going to take when the stakes are a little bit higher than your normal day, right? People have more bags to carry. They have more stuff with them. There's a lot of people that are likely going to be around. So just make sure that you're kind of thinking through realistically rather than just going off of Google Maps saying that it takes you 20 minutes. And so you put 20 minutes in the timeline. Family photos are another good example of things taking longer than you might anticipate. And I get it. It is often one of the hardest, most stressful parts of the day, taking the family photos, but it's so important, right? It's one of the few times that you have everybody together in one spot. So you want to be able to take the time to grab those pictures. Being realistic with your timeline and how long that's going to take will make you feel less stressed knowing that you allotted an appropriate amount of time rather than not giving yourself enough time and then feeling like you're just more and more behind. I talk more about family photos in a previous episode. I should have grabbed the episode number beforehand. I apologize, I don't have it, but go back and I talk about some tips to help make the family photos a little less painful on your wedding day. So make sure you listen to those. And the final area that I see people really underestimate their timing is going to be with the toasts or speeches. Ideally, you don't have anybody that's going over 2 to 3 minutes for any of their toasts, whether it's parents, wedding party, the two of you. 2 to 3 minutes from a guest perspective is ideal. Anything longer, you're going to lose their attention. However, we know that sometimes you tell somebody 2 to 3 minutes, and we know beforehand they're not going to listen to you. Often it's the dads. They can go on and on and on. One tip there, let them know the longer they talk, the colder the dinner they just paid for is getting. And that usually helps rein them in a little bit. But most importantly, I want you to be realistic, because if you know your dad, your best man, your maid of honor, whoever it might be, if you know that they are long-winded and there's no way they're going to be less than 10 minutes, make sure you're being realistic in that timeline. Still tell them 2 to 3 minutes, right? Don't tell them you've given them 10 minutes, because then they're going to take 20. But if you know, just based on past events, or you know that person, if you know it's unlikely that they're going to only talk for 2 to 3 minutes, tell your planner, your catering staff, whatever it might be, make sure that you are realistic in that timing. Because again, from a vendor standpoint, it is so hard when we're standing in the back of the room, the toasts are going on. I'm looking at my watch and I know we are 15 minutes past when salads are supposed to be served, but dad is still talking and there is nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to go get the mic from dad and tell him to be quiet. That's just not going to happen. And so what happens is your dinner is sitting in the back. It's getting cold. Maybe that's cutting into your dance floor time. That's cutting into the time that you have your photographer for. So making sure you're realistic about it ahead of time is super important. Okay, number 3, waiting until after the ceremony to take the family photos or the majority of the photos for the day. This one ties into, I guess I could just basically say number 3 is not doing a first look. Because for most couples, doing a first look is going to really loosen up your photos, right? Your timing for your photos. On occasion, there are couples that have a ceremony that's earlier in the day, then you have a couple of hours in between to take photos, and then the reception, cocktail hour, all of that is a couple hours later. Those are the scenarios where a first look is not necessarily going to impact the timing of your day. However, as I've mentioned in many other episodes, there are multiple reasons why I recommend a first look outside of the timeline piece of it. I'm not going to get into all of that now, but purely from a timeline perspective, if your ceremony and reception are in the same location, I highly recommend you do a first look. I understand the appeal of just the tradition of not seeing each other until you walk down the aisle. However, now there are so many ways that can be recreated that gives you a much more personal and intimate moment together for seeing each other on the first time than you will have when you're walking down the aisle surrounded by people. I always tell my couples, we will make whatever happen. Whatever you want to happen, we'll make it work. So if you are absolutely 100% against the idea of a first look, talk to your vendors and you can make it work. However, from a timeline perspective, if you and your guests are going right from the ceremony into cocktail hour, I think it's a big mistake from a timeline perspective, again, to not do the first look, because that means you only have that 45 to 60 minutes to take all of the photos, your family photos, your wedding party photos, your couple photos. And the thing that always gets sacrificed is the photos of the two of you. So right after the ceremony, we typically will do the family photos, then the wedding party photos, and then it's finally time for photos with just the two of you. And by then, you're either just photoed out or it's time to go back in for the reception, right? So then you're in a panic having to choose, do we go off and do photos, just the two of us, and take an extra 20 minutes and make the guests wait, which also bumps dinner, which also bumps the dancing, which could mean that you don't have as much time with your photographer for the dancing portion of the evening? Or do you sacrifice those couples' photos and you don't end up with many photos, if any at all, of just the two of you on your wedding day? So I highly, highly, highly recommend a first look. If you are worried about it taking away from that intimate moment of seeing each other coming down the aisle, again, talk to your photographer and your planner about how you can make that happen. We have a couple coming up next month. I'm super excited for them to do. We're basically going to recreate the walk down the aisle, but it's a couple hours before the guests are even arriving. So they're still going to have that moment. We're going to stage it so that he's standing up front. She's going to walk down the aisle to him. So they'll still have that feeling, but there's nobody in between them. It can just be the two of them locking eyes. They're going to get amazing photos because nobody's standing out in the aisle, like leaning over with an iPad trying to take a picture and he can't even see her anymore, right? Plus, it is loosening up their timeline so much. They can get all of their photos with their wedding party done after their first look. They're going to do most of their family photos before the ceremony. And then all they have to do is a final group of some of the bigger pictures with the guests that won't be there earlier, but that should take 10, 15 minutes, and then they get to enjoy the rest of their cocktail hour. So there are definitely still ways to recreate that moment and make it even more special for the two of you because it's just the two of you. A lot of our couples now will do a first look and then exchange private vows. So you can have, again, a more intimate moment than vows that you will be saying in front of everybody you've ever met. So it really can open up the possibilities of having those special moments for you. And the other piece is if you don't see each other until the ceremony, our average ceremony is like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You're not seeing your best friend until 4 or 5 o'clock on the most important day of your life. That seems kind of crazy that you only get to spend a handful of hours together on your wedding day versus the majority of it. I'm going to get off the soapbox now. Number 3, though, I highly recommend doing a first look if at all possible. It's really going to make your timeline and your enjoyment of the day much, much smoother. Number 4 is ignoring the other factors that are going to impact your day. It's easy to forget that life and the world is still moving on your wedding day. And I don't mean this in a bad way. I really truly don't, but the world doesn't stop because it's your wedding day, right? And I say that because things are going to happen. Traffic is still going to be an issue. Construction is not going to stop because it's your wedding day. People are still going to get flat tires, get sick, be running late. Things are going to happen just as they do on any other day. And I think this might be more of a mindset thing going into the wedding day, is know that there are going to be things that come up and you just kind of have to let them go. I will say most of the time they're super minor things, but they're reasons why it's really good to have at least a day of planner helping you out, because that person can field any possible issues that might really impact the day. But generally speaking, there's a few things that are important to keep in mind when you are planning out your timeline that you can prepare for in advance, potentially, but also keeping in mind that there are going to be things that pop up and you just kind of need to go with the flow on the wedding day. So outside of those moments, the things that are going to pop up, and again, reasons why we want that buffer time in the timeline for those things that we can't predict, but some of the things that you can potentially predict or at least potentially get in front of, looking at the sunset time. If having golden hour photos are super important, you have no control over when the sun is going to set. If you get a beautiful sunny day, which hopefully you will, but you have no control over when that's going to happen. For some of you, it might be the most inconvenient time. The perfect golden hour sunset photos are happening right when you should be doing your toast, or right when dinner is being served. Maybe it's right when your ceremony is happening fully indoors. But knowing all of that in advance and kind of plugging that into your timeline might determine how you adjust things. So if you look at the sunset time and you have the ability to schedule the time of your ceremony, or you're able to adjust things based on that in advance, fantastic. So take a look at those things in advance before you set your timeline, if at all possible. Some of the other key things are rush hour or local traffic. So this is definitely important for those of you that have a weekday wedding or rehearsal. Fridays is usually what impacts us, but if you're having a Monday through Friday wedding, anywhere in there, you definitely want to consider rush hour. Friday afternoons, when we have like 4 or 5 o'clock ceremonies, we want to plan on starting a little bit later. So maybe the invitation says 5, but we'll plan on maybe like 5:10, because we know it's likely that guests are going to get stuck in traffic. Maybe they planned on coming early, but they end up stuck in traffic, or getting through parking or whatever it might be is just taking a little bit longer. And same with venues. If your venue is a little bit further away, the same wedding I mentioned earlier with the first look, their venue is a little bit further away for a lot of their guests, even from the hotel. It's a beautiful venue, but it's a bit more removed from, it's not like in an immediate downtown area. So we're planning on starting the ceremony about 15 minutes after the time that we told the guests, because the other piece is once they park, there's a little bit of a walk or a golf cart ride to the ceremony site. So we want to be realistic. If we say 4 o'clock, I know from my 20 plus years of experience, 4 o'clock, we're going to see people still pulling in to the parking lot, most likely. They're going to park, and then it's going to take them 5 minutes or so to get themselves out of their car and make their way to the actual ceremony site. So rather than knowing that we're starting the reception, we're starting the actual event totally behind, we're being realistic and saying, okay, we're likely not going to actually start sending the wedding party down the aisle until like 4:15 instead of 4 o'clock. So keeping those things in mind will really help you create your timeline. Some other things are major events in your city, whether it's a sporting event. Is there a big concert that's close to your venue? Is there going to be a festival that's closing down a park close to you? Try and look into things like that that might be happening on the day or weekend of your wedding, so that you can anticipate what might back people up or what might take a little bit longer than usual. One of the final things I want to mention is considering if you have a lot of guests that are checking into a hotel. Often hotels don't allow check-in to happen until 3 or 4. That may or may not impact your timing. It might impact your wedding party. It might impact you. It's one of the reasons why for hair and makeup, even if you're not planning on staying at the hotel, you still have to reserve the room the night before so you can start early enough. But keep in mind that if having guests check in is important prior to your ceremony, talk to the hotel about how you can either guarantee an early check-in for certain guests. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but maybe those in your wedding party or whatnot. It may or may not impact you, but again, that can be an outside factor that could impact your day more than you anticipate. Number 5 is not communicating the timeline that you've put together with the VIPs of your wedding day. So for most couples, that is going to be your parents, grandparents, anybody in that immediate family group, and then your wedding party. Make sure that you're sharing the timeline with them. You can even put together like a wedding party or family specific timeline. They don't need to know when the vendors arrive, or certain things later on in the some of the particulars. They don't need to necessarily have all of that information, but if it's easier, just send them the one main timeline that you have. But you can pull out another timeline that has what their expectations are, what your expectations are of them, for where you need them on the entire weekend of the wedding if you're having multiple days. So what time will you need them to be at a rehearsal? Is there a rehearsal dinner? How about breakfast in the morning for the wedding party? Do they need to do that on their own, or are you guys all having breakfast or lunch together? All of those things, the when, the where, the what they need to bring with them, make sure that they have a pretty detailed outline of that, because that is also not just going to save the timeline from running smoothly on your wedding day, but it's going to save your sanity from answering a whole bunch of questions that week of the wedding. Now, inevitably, people aren't going to read it and they're still going to ask you those questions, right? The same thing's going to happen with your wedding website, with your other guests. But at least you have a way to say, hey, it's all in the timeline that I sent over. Take a look and let me know if you still have any questions. Same with your wedding website. When somebody inevitably says, hey, what time is such and such? You can just say, hey, here's the website. Take a look. It's all on there, but let me know if you have any other questions. That's kind of a nice way of being like, I already told you, check it out, you know? But for most of your wedding party and family, if you can give them that information in advance, that's going to make sure that they can prepare and know when they need to be where, and it takes a lot of stress off of your shoulders. Make sure that you're also including the address for various locations as well as any parking instructions if applicable. So if there's a specific place where they need to park or they need to avoid to park, include that in the information so they know where to go. Number 6, I think, is a really important one, and that is not scheduling any time for just the two of you. And this does also connect to the first look timing. Having a first look gives you more of the one-on-one time with each other on the wedding day. But I'm really talking about making sure that the two of you take a few intentional moments to just kind of pause and take the day in. This isn't necessarily something that you have to put on your timeline, but I encourage it for some couples because it helps you remember in the day, not necessarily that, oh, we scheduled the alone time at 7:35 after dinner. Let's make sure that we nail that right at 7:35. But some great opportunities for this are after the first look. So first look also, although 99% of our first looks are photographed or do have the vendor team along with them to capture it, you don't have to do that. You can have a completely private first look. You can share private vows with or without your paparazzi following you around at that moment. Immediately after the ceremony, taking a little bit of a breather to just like take in the moment. You just got married, have kind of that couple of seconds, even a minute. And then once the dance floor opens, just taking again that second to kind of step back, look at all of your family and loved ones that are in the room together. This is what you have been planning on and waiting for. Everybody tells you the day is going to fly by. It will, no matter what you do. But just taking in a few moments to just embrace it all and soak it in, your hard work that you've been putting into this wedding coming together, just soak it all in. Again, these aren't necessarily things that you're going to put in your timeline, but they are moments that you can create with your timeline, being intentional with your timeline by, again, considering a first look, making sure that you're not too structured with your timing. When you have too tight of a timeline, you don't allow yourself those moments to just say, you know what? Let's just take a second. I know we're supposed to go take our pictures now, or we're supposed to do the first dance, but I just kind of want to soak this all in for a second. That's absolutely fine. And giving yourself that buffer time makes those moments possible. And number 7, of course, is going to be not having somebody on the day to manage that timeline for you. Because as important as it is to have a realistic timeline, a detailed and realistic timeline, from my perspective as a planner, it's also equally important to be able to toss that out the window and go with what you're given on that day, especially if we're talking about like an outdoor wedding and weather could be something that impacts everything. Again, life happens on your wedding day. Things are going to happen that you can't anticipate. And so having somebody there as like the buffer, the buffer between things going wrong and you having to deal with it is going to help you enjoy the day. That's one of the biggest things when we're working with couples on the wedding day, whether we've been working with them full service or just for day of coordination. We are that buffer between them and whatever else might be happening. So if the vendor gets a flat tire, if something goes wrong in the kitchen, if it looks like it's going to start downpouring exactly when the ceremony is scheduled, it's not on your shoulders to figure out what to do, right? You have that buffer of somebody that is either making the adjustments in the timeline or the setup or whatever it might be. They are dealing with that piece of it. So you can just continue taking photos, getting dressed, whatever it might be. A good planner is going to be able to not just put a timeline together for you in the preparation, but they're also going to be able to handle it for you when things don't go as planned. Again, I don't say this to freak you out, but something happens or goes off plan for every single wedding. It's going to happen. It always does. That's again life happening. But if you have that buffer, that person that's in between you and whatever is happening out there, you don't need to worry about it. Some of the craziest moments in the past 20 years of weddings have been making the call to adjust our timeline to fit whether it's a storm coming in. Again, most of it is Mother Nature related, but other things do happen. And having somebody there that you know is in charge of also directing the rest of the team. So, not just making the call for you, but then also letting the photographer, the DJ or band, the caterer, letting everybody else know, like, hey, this is the pivot we have to make, is so important in you being able to enjoy the day. Now, if you are relying on your venue coordinator as your day of coordinator, just make sure that you're talking to them about what they actually handle. Because in my experience, a lot of venues will say we offer day of coordination, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the point person for the things that I was just talking about. So they might not be managing your timeline. If vendors are running late, they probably aren't going to be your contact. They're mostly focused on the venue piece, as they should be. That's where they are, that's what they work for. But that is one of the biggest questions when your venue says they have day of coordinators for you. How are they handling the external pieces? Are they confirming all of these things with your vendors in advance of the wedding and then also on the day of the wedding? Are they also managing other weddings happening that day or other customers? Are they going to give venue tours like they toured you on the day of a wedding? If they are, that's fine. That's what their role is at the venue. That's their actual job. But that means that their focus is not solely on your wedding that day. And that definitely leaves you vulnerable for not having somebody there that is ready to handle the situation if something comes up. So, those are the 7 mistakes I see couples make all the time in their wedding day timelines. And if today's episode has you looking at your own timeline, thinking, like, wait a minute, do we have this right? Again, I want you to join for the wedding planning happy hour that is going to be focused purely on timelines. It's happening August 26th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register for it over at planningcollective.com/happy hour. Those sessions are going to be free. And again, I'm going to be rotating topics every month. If you have any topics that you would love to hear about either on the podcast or in those wedding planning happy hour sessions. That is a tongue twister. You can always message me on Instagram at Planning Collectively. Don't forget the LY, Planning Collectively. And I will see you in the next episode.